Hello, welcome to Viking TV celebration of World Space Week. I'm your host, Charlie Armstrong, and I'm joined today by Anna Fisher and her daughter, Kristin. I am a Viking resident astronomer, and you will encounter Viking resident astronomers if you cruise aboard the Viking Orion or the Viking Jupiter, where we have a planetarium on each one of those ships. And the Viking resident astronomer will give shows in the planetarium, as well as have stargazing sessions out on deck. And of course, our lectures have to do with astronomy and space exploration related topics. A little bit about my background. I'm a 35-year veteran of NASA. I retired back in 2014. I've worked 35 years at the Johnson Space Center, primarily as a NASA flight controller, crew trainer, procedures writer, and a bunch of other things. And if you're interested more about my particular career, last year during Space Week, Viking.TV had Ann Diamond conduct an interview with me, and I believe that interview is still available on Viking.TV on demand. So, as part of Viking celebration this week, we have Anna Fisher, who is not only a retired NASA astronaut, but she also happens to be the godmother of the Viking Orion cruise ship. She's also a medical doctor and also holds a master's and a bachelor's degree in chemistry from UCLA. And she was one of the first 6 women astronauts selected by NASA in 1978. And because of Kristin, she was also the first mother to fly in space on STS-51A in 1984. Anna's career spanned 39 years. And when she wasn't flying in space, she supported the Space Shuttle program, the International Space Station, and finally the Orion program, which is slated to take us back to the moon and on to Mars. That vehicle is currently being stacked on its launch vehicle, the Space Launch System down at the Cape, and is slated to have its first launch at the beginning of this next year. That's my shameless NASA plug. So it's also no coincidence that the Viking Orion is named that, Anna being its godmother. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Now, Kristin is not only Anna's daughter, but she is also a renowned broadcast journalist. She majored in broadcast journalism from Boston University, starting her career as a freelance correspondent. Then she joined Fox News and in 2015 became a White House correspondent. She had the opportunity to join President Trump in Afghanistan in 2019 when he visited with the Taliban. She recently moved to CNN and is now the senior space and defense correspondent for CNN. So, Anna's joining us from Houston, Texas, home of the Johnson Space Center, and Kristin is joining us from her home in Washington, D.C. Welcome to you both. It's great to see you. And Kristin, you've grown up quite a bit since I last saw you.
I would hope so. It's great to see you, Charlie. Thanks for having us. I'm excited to chat with you. And Mom, it's great to see you as well, as always.
Great to see both of you, my good friend Charlie and my wonderful daughter, Kristin.
She made sure, Charlie, that we were wearing our matching necklaces before.
Excellent.
We started. She said, I got a text right before we started, better wear it.
That's right. Mothers and daughters. Oh, I want to also, before we get started, for the folks watching at home, just wanted to let you know, this is a pre-recorded interview, so unfortunately we will not be able to take any live questions today. So with that, let's get started. So Anna, Viking is back to cruising, and I understand you just came back from the Bermuda escape, which is basically going around Bermuda. How did you like that?
Oh, it was the last of the Bermuda cruises that I was very fortunate to attend, and it was so special to go back and see Viking Orion. The last time I saw it was on the Shakedown cruise back in 2018, I believe it was, and it was just such an amazing thing to watch the birth, actually, of this amazingly beautiful ship, and to go back and see it again. And I'd never been to Bermuda. Bermuda was so beautiful. And it was a very relaxing cruise, because one thing on most cruises, you're going on all these excursions to see these fantastic things. And this one, we had some excursions, but we also had a chance to just enjoy the beautiful ship and the wonderful meals, and the crew was delightful. Everybody was it was just a truly wonderful experience, and I'm so grateful. I hope you get to do it someday, Kristin.
I know, I'm dying to.
You should have gone with your mom. So, my wife and I had an opportunity to do that one too, and it was great, just like you said. And the COVID restrictions were not onerous. If anyone's worried about that, I mean, felt very safe. Everybody's vaccinated on board. Got to spit in a tube every day for your PCR test, so everybody's tested every day. And we had commented that Viking was always really great about cleaning in the pre-COVID days, and boy, they have taken it up another notch as well. So everything's very clean, and everybody's masked up on board, even though you're all vaccinated and everything else. And so it was a great experience, and I think everybody was very comfortable, and everybody was glad to be out in the world again. That was the one thing we heard a lot. So
Totally
let's talk now about some space stuff. So, Anna, how did a Southern California girl end up being an astronaut? Is that something you always wanted to do?
Well, from the time I was 12 years old, when my father, who was in the military, we were stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I listened to Al Shepard's launch in May 5th, 1961. And at that moment, I just decided that I wanted to do that someday. But, when I was really young, the career of astronaut didn't even exist. So the Mercury 7 had just been selected, and women weren't even allowed to fly high-performance jets. So it certainly didn't seem like a realistic career option. But the seed was planted, and from that moment on, I always knew that's what I wanted to do if I ever had the opportunity. I just didn't realistically think that that opportunity would ever come.
Sure. And so what was it like when you got the phone call?
Oh, well, Mr. Abbey. Certainly, it was just the most amazing feeling. It was almost surreal, this thing I had dreamed about for so long and had pretty much given up by this time. I was already towards the end of my medical training. And then to suddenly have this opportunity to apply, I found out very late in the application process and barely made the deadline. And 6 weeks later was interviewing, and 6 months later received the call that I was in the first group of astronauts ever selected for the shuttle program, and then the first group of women ever selected for the U.S. space program. It was a dream come true, and I was never happier, except for the fact that my then husband, Kristin's dad, was not accepted in that first group. He was accepted in the later group, so that added a bittersweet quality to it, but he was always very supportive of me. So I was real excited, but I tried not to be too excited so that I didn't make him feel bad.
Right. And we men always appreciate that. So you were one of the first 6 women. How was your experience different, you think, than the men, your male colleagues in that same class, you think?
From a training perspective and all of that, I don't really think it was that different because NASA had made the commitment to accept women, and they, really treated us the same as the guys. The only real difference, I think, was the way the media treated us. I'm so grateful that we didn't have internet and Twitter and that sort of stuff back then. That would have made it, I think, a lot more difficult because it was, as it was, we had a lot of attention and a lot of focus. Like when we went to water survival training, there are photographers photographing everything. And I think each of us felt some of a heightened perhaps responsibility to the fact that we were the first women and we were paving a way for the young women that would come after us. And but I don't think any of us did it for that reason. We just did it because that was what we wanted to do with our lives. But we weren't. But we were cognizant of the fact that we wanted each of us to be successful, and we were. All the 6 of us flew in space. So other than that, and other than the fact that we were asked more questions about, for me, leaving my daughter and things like that, which the guys were never asked those kind of questions. But from a NASA perspective, I think we were treated pretty much exactly the same as our male colleagues.
Okay. And So speaking of that, the mother perspective and all that. So Kristin, what was it like having parents, particularly an astronaut mom, but astronaut parents when you were growing up?
It was incredibly cool, but it was also, in a way, I didn't know anything else, right? Not one, but both of my parents were astronauts. And as you know, I grew up in Taylor Lake Village, which is just a 5-minute drive away from the Johnson Space Center. So it felt like everyone I knew was involved in some way with the space program. Many of the parents that I knew were astronauts too. And so it had this sense of real normalcy. I mean, I remember it being very exciting in the sense that my mom used to make us get up for every single space shuttle launch, no matter what time of night it came on. She would wake my sister and I up at like 2 a.m. She'd drag us into the TV room and she would stand there and cheer, like pumping her fists, screaming, "Go, go, go, good luck, Godspeed." And my sister and I were like, "What are you doing?" And now I find myself doing the exact same thing with my daughter. So it's come full circle, but it really took me kind of getting away from Houston, Texas, going away to college. And it took me doing that to fully appreciate how unique and special of a childhood I had.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So it was college when it struck you that way. It was kind of like that with my kids as well. I mean, my children do not have astronauts as parents. However, we're NASA guys, and and they grew up like you're talking about. They have friends that have parents that were astronauts, and went to high school and elementary school with friends who had parents as astronauts and all this kind of thing. And it wasn't until they moved away and realized that other people thought that was really cool. So very good. So Anna, tell us just a little bit about 51A and what your role was in that.
Well, 51A, let me backtrack a little bit. There was a short period of time where NASA named the flights something other than a numbered flight. I always think it was
good point.
Yeah. Want to have an STS-13 after Apollo 13.
NASA's not superstitious, but we are a little stitious.
I'm going to use that again. I like that.
I stole it from The Office. So.
Oh, I should have known that then. Okay.
They came. It comes. I believe it was like the STS. The 5 is the fiscal year, not the calendar year that you launch, and the 1 I think was you were the first flight of that, and the A is which launch pad, 39A or B that you launch on. But actually, it was the 14th shuttle flight. But that's why it's called 51A. But 51A was the most. If I could have picked a flight to be on, I would have picked that one because my crewmates were amazing. Our commander, Rick Hout, who was also the commander of the return to flight after Challenger, Dale Gardner, who did the spacewalk with Joe Allen, and Dave Walker, the pilot. They were just wonderful crewmates. But the really unique thing was that on an earlier shuttle mission, 2 communication satellites were deployed that were supposed to then have a rocket engine to take them to a higher orbit. And that rocket engine failed on not one, but both of these satellites. And I was actually in New York at the time commenting on that flight on the Today Show. And I remember being asked if NASA would try to go get those satellites, because here were these very expensive satellites that were perfectly good, but they were useless because they were in the wrong orbit. And I said, there's no way that NASA would do that because the satellites weren't designed to be retrieved. Well, that was in February of 1984. And in November of 1984, those were the best words I've ever eaten because our crew was selected, pushed on by the insurance industry to go try to figure out a way to retrieve these satellites. And those few months in between February and November, we were so involved in the development of the hardware, the training, the procedures, and it was just so exciting. And no one had ever handled hardware of that huge and that massive. And so I think we also sort of laid the stage later on for building the International Space Station, knowing that we could handle things of that size on orbit. as long as you were careful and moved slowly. So it was just an amazing, amazing flight to be a part of. And Chris Kraft, the first flight director who invented mission control, wrote us a letter afterwards saying that he thought it was just an amazing mission after the first launch of human into space on Apollo 11. And I've always treasured those comments because Dr. Kraft was one of my heroes.
Oh yes, everybody at NASA, pretty much, at least at JSC, that's for sure. And of course, you know, one of the things you had going for you is you had an excellent lead EVA flight controller, you know, for your flight.
That's quite.
I don't know who that would have been, but but I'm also the part of the reason why you gave him the wrong answer on the Today Show, because you called our back room on STS-11 when those Complapa and West Star deployed and they didn't fire up. And I answered the phone and you said, "Hey, is there any chance that we're going to be able to go get these things?" I said, "Not a chance. They're not designed for that," and all this kind of thing. And like we had done on STS-13, 41C, that was our first repair of the Solar Maximum mission spacecraft. But that had been, most of it had been designed to be repaired on orbit. We had some little connectors we had to work on, but yeah, so I apologize. I gave you the wrong answer. You know,
like I said, it was an amazing mission, and we were the first shuttle, first space to bring hardware back from space, other than the Apollo astronauts bringing back the moon rocks. And I remember Kristin called me a couple weeks ago and asked, you know, did you actually fill out a, you know, declaration form when you landed? And I said, I don't remember that, but it turned out that Bill had saved it. And yes, we had filled out a form saying we had nothing to declare, but I certainly hope they didn't charge us anything for it.
Well, that's good, because it'd been a lot of money. So you were a mom. You had Kristin, you were about a year old at the time, right? So you don't have a whole lot of recollection, I bet, about that flight. But so coming out of that flight, and I know you had to make some career choices as a mom and a woman. Can you tell us about those a little bit?
Yeah, well, I will say one thing, that Kristin's absolute first memory was going out on the dock the night that we were doing the rendezvous with the first satellite. And I think my mom was so excited about it, she was yelling. And Kristin actually has a brief glimpse of a memory of that she wrote about in school, and teachers thought she was just making it up. Yeah, when we came back, I had already been assigned to my second flight within a month of landing, and I was about 6 weeks or so from my second flight when the Challenger happened. And that was when I really had to sit down and try to make some decisions about where I wanted my career to go. And we decided we wanted to have another child, and we're very fortunate to have my younger daughter, Kara. And at that point, I realized that that the shuttle was going to be, you know, grounded for at least 2 years. And so I made a decision to take a year's leave of absence, which ultimately wound up being 7 years, and was very fortunate to then be able to come back in 1996. But that was probably the hardest thing I ever did, was making that decision. Well, leaving Kristin was the hardest thing, but second hardest was making that decision to leave and then coming back after a 7-year leave of absence.
Yes. Now, going back to that a little bit, on 51A, you told me a story one time about Dave Walker approaching you like the night before you all launched. And can you tell us about that?
Well, actually, it was as we were, our families had already left to go to the Cape, and so we were in quarantine, so you weren't supposed to go visit with your family. So after they left, we went home to pick up some belongings to take with us. So we had just left crew quarters at the Space Center, and just as we were getting ready to leave, Dave looks over at me and says, "Well, have you written the letter yet?" And I go, "What do you mean?" He said, "You know, the letter." And I began to realize, oh, he meant like if I didn't come back, and I was really surprised because Dave Walker, as you know, was a robust, fun person. He had flown, I don't know how many combat missions in Vietnam. And, it's going to like really hit home. I guess this is a risky thing we're about to do. So I ran home and I wrote a letter to Kristin. I wrote a letter to Bill. And luckily I still have those in my jewelry bags.
Yes.
Didn't have to give them away. But anyway, that was, I've always been surprised because it wasn't something I would have expected from Dave.
Right. Or most people don't think about they go on a business trip, that we all pretty much expect that we'll be coming home. And unfortunately, we found out a couple of times that didn't happen to our friends.
I thought about that a fair amount that year, being a new mom. And so we did lots of video of Kristin and with Kristin and everything in case that happened. And so we always joke that that's one of the reasons Kristin went into broadcast journalism.
There you go.
She was so used to being on camera and being asked, what she thought about this, even though she was pretty young and couldn't really talk. But I wanted her to at least be able to remember how much I loved her if I wasn't able to be there with her.
Yeah. So, Kristin, you have a high-profile job, and you've got to leave your daughter a lot. So are there any influences that you've had from your mom on what decisions you've made about you and your career and what you're doing?
Of course. I think she's the person I talk to when, for instance, we were recently down in Florida at my grandmother's memorial service, and I found out on that trip, I had to be away from my daughter on that trip due to some COVID restrictions with her school. And so I found out on that trip that as soon as I got back from Florida, I was going to have to go back to Florida the next day to go cover the Inspiration 4 launch. And I was going to have to be there for a week and not just like a day or two. And I was, just a little upset about it. I mean, I wanted to go cover the launch. I absolutely love covering space, but it was just a lot of time away from my daughter. And my mom was the first one to be like, she won't remember it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Just go do what you do, and get back to her. And the other piece of advice she's always given me that I thought was really great was, when you're working, focus on work. Do your work and give it 100%. And then when you're home, focus on being at home, focus on being with your daughter and your family, and really do your best to compartmentalize those two. Obviously, it's much easier said than done. But I do think about that a lot, and I really do. She's made me feel much better. This is going to sound terrible, but she's made me feel much better about doing travel for work. And one of the things she also said was, very early on, she said, "Do you remember any of that? Do you remember when you were really little, is your overriding memory of me being away?" And I said, no. And she was like, and even if it was, would you have wanted me to go into space? Would you have wanted me to do that? And the answer was obviously yes. So in having those kinds of thoughts and thinking about it, it does something to assuage or diminish my mom guilt just a bit.
Yeah. I understand that. So since you grew up in the space environment with space parents and all that kind of stuff, did you ever have a desire to go?
Well, it's a complicated answer. I think, part of what we were talking about earlier, growing up in that environment, having two parents do the same thing and both do it really, really well. You constantly get asked the question, are you going to be an astronaut? Are you going to be an astronaut? Are you going to be an astronaut? And I think there was just a part of me that wanted to just do something different and kind of pave my own path in the world. And it did take me kind of going away to realize how special space was. And the older I got, the more I realized that I just truly genuinely held this interest on my own, and it wasn't just because of who my parents were or what they did. So when CNN gave me the opportunity to come cover space full time at the dawn of this truly second space age, I mean, I think I've had the most incredible first few weeks on the job on the space beat that I could ever possibly dream of. So it's worked out quite well, but it took me about 38 years to get here.
Yeah, it's one of those things that kids have to grow up and realize what's really cool in life,
Maybe you could be the first journalist in space.
It's exactly.
But that's everybody always says that too. But that's actually, I mean, sure, I'd love to go to space and see the Earth, but it's not like all these firsts are or they've already happened, right? I mean, look at what the Inspiration 4 crew did, and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson. I mean, it is truly becoming
it's a different
occurrence for people going into space after this nearly decade-long drought of any crewed missions being launched from U.S. soil. So everybody always asks me that question, and sure, I'd love to go, but I'm genuinely just interested in, covering this incredible time in this industry.
Yeah. It is, and it's a great segue because I was going to ask you both. So, what do you think about the commercialization and privatization of space, and the fact that we have seems like we're developing a lot of opportunities for ordinary people to be able to go into space. Eventually, there'll be a Viking, space cruiser. I'll bet one year.
Love that idea. I'll go on that.
Yeah, me too.
I remember at the Viking Orion float out ceremony. That's what Mr. Hagen was there, the owner of Viking Cruises. And I challenged him. I said, someday there will be cruise spaceships. And I hope I can be the godmother of the first cruise spaceship.
Yeah, to cruise to one of those inflatable habitats that so many private companies are working to develop. I love this idea.
Yeah,
but
it's great.
I think, Charlie, to answer your question, I think this new era is amazing. I will say that, oh gosh, I don't know, it's been 10 or 15 years ago, Kristin, when we were in Alamogordo, when they were having a conference for the first people that were thinking about doing this. And I remember
like 2007, I think.
Something like that. Yeah. And I remember thinking that Elon Musk he's got some great ideas, but he does not know how tough it is to go into space. I was
skeptical.
I will admit, I was very skeptical. And I remember he came to speak at one of our 8 o'clock astronaut office meetings, probably the best attended astronaut meeting I've ever been to. And it was just really amazing listening to him. And what he said, which I thought was funny, was that when he decided to go into the space business, his friends sent him all these videos of all the exploding rockets and everything. And yet he was able to ignore that. And I have come full circle to from being a total skeptic to, and in fact, when we had the choice between Boeing and SpaceX, who was going to be the first one to get humans back into space.
She told me Boeing, for the record.
I would have
her word.
put my money on Boeing. So I think it is really amazing what SpaceX has done. I think what Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos has done, and Richard Branson, I think it's amazing, really unbelievable in a relatively short period of time. I think most people in the astronaut office are very supportive. We think that the more people that can go into space, the better. And so I think I'm very supportive of it, and look forward to hearing about their experiences, and they're getting to spread the word in a different way than we have. I think it's really an amazing time.
Absolutely, and for it to all come together, just one after another, boom, 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 and be very successful. And I was with you. I mean, I was like, this is not going to work, because this is really hard stuff they're doing. But they paid the price, and they've done the things they need to do, and hopefully they've listened to us some about how to make it work. Just a couple more questions. I have kind of a light one. I alluded to the fact that the Orion spacecraft, our next spacecraft, and the Viking Orion have the same name. What was the connection there, Miss Anna?
I've had the privilege to work on 3 amazing programs. Space Shuttle, I was chief of the space station branch in the office at the very beginning of Space Station, and then worked on Orion at its very beginning. And so it was the last thing I was working on as I retired. And when I was given this wonderful opportunity to be godmother of their 5th ocean liner at the time, they also asked me if I had any ideas for naming it. And they tend to name all their ships and something to do with space and stars and exploration. So I thought, well, that's a really neat connection, because Orion has always been my favorite constellation. I was working on the Orion vehicle the time, and they were giving me this opportunity to name this beautiful ship. So Orion was my suggestion, and they liked it. And I'll never forget when I came to the float out ceremony and looked at this big ship, and there it was, named Orion. I go, wow. I remember Kristin's comment, because at the time she was pregnant with my then first grandchild, Clara, and Kristin goes, I think you're more excited about being a godmother of a ship than a grandmother. I said, well, that's not the case, but you got to admit it's a little unusual.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and it is a very special ship, as are all of them. One serious question. Okay, we kind of touched on it just a little bit. So, in the last few days, there's been a little bit of criticism of what people call the billionaire space race. Okay, it's really raising the head of what I always call the old argument that they used to have, and I thought that had pretty much gone away because of all the benefits out of space. But why spend so much money on space when we have so many problems here on Earth? I mean, Bill Gates came out the other day and kind of took a jab at Bezos and Musk, because there's still a lot of problems here on Earth they need to work, and he doesn't get the whole space thing. And the UN Secretary General is talking about spending billions of dollars in space when we have millions of people that are hungry on Earth. How do you respond to that, both of you?
Well, my answer is, if you look at a family, you need to take care of your daily needs, your housing, your food and everything. Ignore your future, because you do that at your peril. And I think the same is true about our country and our economy. We need to do our best to take care of all the people that we're responsible to, but you can't ignore your future. And I think mankind there's always been some element of humanity that wants to explore. And John Young has always made the case that look what happened to the dinosaurs. So if we want our species to survive, it may not happen next year or 100 years or even thousands of years, but at some point in our existence, collective existence, face that possibility. So I just think it's very important to push the boundaries of what we know. And generally, when we're in the process of doing that, you discover other things that are beneficial to people here on Earth. The improvement in computers, and the list of things that came out of the Apollo program and the space program is huge. But you don't do it for that reason. That's just another a benefit. And also, I think it motivates our young people to pursue careers, and then we all benefit as we learn new things. That's my answer. But I also just think there's a very deep-seated need for people to explore. I don't know, maybe you see it differently, Kristin.
No, I agree with most of what you said. I do think that this kind of criticism deserves our attention and exploration. From an optics perspective, I can understand how perhaps it doesn't look great to have, Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson going on what many have accused them of going on, these quick, 10-minute, hour and a half long joyrides to space. But I think the bigger picture here is that where the criticism should really be going is, yes, everything that these billionaires have done is absolutely incredible from a technology standpoint. But pretty soon here, as somebody once said to me, you know, we have to be careful that we're not trading a government monopoly for a monopoly in the private sector, potentially. And as a journalist who's based in Washington, D.C., you know, one of my primary purposes is to, you know, provide some level of accountability and oversight, and ask the tough questions of these private companies. But at the same time, you know, this is not NASA. These are not companies that are beholden to taxpayers as a government agency once was. So I hear the criticism on the billionaire standpoint, but I think there's other, not necessarily criticisms, but other questions that are more pressing that we should be asking both of the billionaires, also of Congress, in terms of why aren't we doing more with managing space traffic and space junk? But back to the billionaires, the thing I just go back to is, you know, at least they got us talking about space again. I mean, yes, for folks like you, Charlie, and you, Mom, you guys always stayed in it. Y'all were always plugged into the, you know, space industry. But for your average people like Elon Musk and Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos, say what you want, but they got spaceflight, human spaceflight, back into the mainstream conversation and in our national discourse. And I think the value of that cannot be overstated.
I agree.
Good answers. And in addition to, I think, what, just to emphasize your point, Kristin, some is they're democratizing space. You know, I thought it was a brilliant thing that they had one guy paying for Inspiration 4, and he took 3, lack of a better term, regular folks along with him. And I think that will happen more and more. And in a few minutes, closing this out, Anna will have a little video we'll put at the end of this where she discusses the value of exploration and people's perspectives that they grow from the ability to explore. And the more people get to see the pale blue dot in that way, it can only benefit mankind, in my view. So I think that's great. We're going to wrap up here. I think I really appreciate your time, but I have to ask Anna one last question. What was the most boring meeting that you were ever in?
Well, Charlie, you certainly know that
so I'm going to give you a shot.
You're the chair of the absolute most boring meeting I have ever attended. You know, when people think you're an astronaut and they think you're going to be doing all exciting stuff, we're given the assignment of, because the international partners were complaining about all the acronyms and abbreviations and asked us to have to justify everyone we use, because they're already learning a new language. They didn't want to learn this other language as well, which I think Kristin can relate to as well, because she has critiqued me many times about my use of abbreviations and acronyms. So
people don't understand you.
Right. Well, so Charlie was given the assignment to go through everything, starting from A to Z, going through every single abbreviation
used in space is right here,
and every flight controller had to come in and justify why they need to use an abbreviation, because there wasn't enough room on a screen, a display, to fit the name, or in the telemetry or whatever. But they had to come in and justify every single one of them. And we started at A, we went to Z. I think the meeting lasted 3 days, if I recall.
At least. I thought it was 3 weeks, but maybe it just felt that way.
That is brutal. A 3-day meeting on acronyms. Wow.
Oh my Lord. Abbreviations. You know, how do you abbreviate status? Is it STAT? Is it STA? Or the decision was you're not going to abbreviate status, just write out status. Okay, because it's just silly. You know, you're abbreviating almost nothing.
Literally every single one that was listed as an approved abbreviation or acronym.
Yeah, we brought in every discipline. Okay, what are the abbreviations we use? What are the acronyms you want to use? no, you're not going to use that one. You're going to use this one, for whatever reason. We had brought in every source material we could find of where these things have ever been used. What do the Russians call it? What do the Europeans call it?
Charlie, my mom has started teaching my daughter acronyms. She also, when I was away, the last time I was out of town and she came to babysit, I came home to find out that she'd written out checklists for my daughter. There was a pre-sleep checklist and a post-sleep checklist that my daughter had to go through. So, the nest traditions of acronyms and checklists live on through the next generation.
Oh, and that gets us into the next most boring meeting, the standards of procedures. When do you use a check mark versus not? Anyway, I don't think you at home want to hear about all that, but it's all stuff that must be done in order to fly successfully in space. But I appreciate your guys' time today. This has been wonderful. It's good to see you again, Kristin, and of course, always Anna. And Anna, you're heading out for extensive travels over the next few weeks, I understand, and so good luck on all that.
Yes, and one of those will be on Vikings Athens to Istanbul, so I'm real excited about that. My son-in-law Walter has always told me that Istanbul was one of his favorite cities in the world, so I'm really excited about that. And I love to travel, love to explore, so I feel very blessed to be able to both do some personal travel and then also get to do some speaking and some business kind of things as well. It's always wonderful.
Yeah, I just have to say, Mom and Charlie, you guys make retirement look good. Like,
your mom really makes it look good. I'm trying.
On as many Viking cruises and as many fun trips as y'all, because some of us still have to work here.
I remember this.
I have always said I haven't retired. I've just changed jobs. That's it. But it's been really wonderful, and I can't wait to go on a Viking cruise with you. We have to have Clara grow up a little bit, but I can't wait to do that with you and Kara and James and all my wonderful family, because it's just a wonderful experience.
Yes. Well, thank you again, and we will see you all next time. And everybody watching, thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for the rest of this week. There'll be more Space Week to come. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Good day.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, sweetie.
Bye, Mom.
It's just such an incredibly beautiful planet. You cannot imagine what that view from space is like. And you look out into the vast darkness, at least so far as we know. There's nothing else out there, certainly nothing close enough with current technology for humans to live. You just realize what a special place this is. When you get up there, it's just absolutely magnificent. Then you fly over different parts of the world where there's problems. You'll pass over the Middle East and you'll look down there and you'll realize all the turmoil that's occurring there. I understand history and all the differing feelings that people have. But to, waste our time killing each other just seems so pointless. When you first get on orbit, you want to look at your hometown and your home country, and then after a while, you're just kind of looking at your continent, and then pretty soon, you just start to feel like you're a part of the world. You're from the United States and appreciate that, but you no longer feel like you're just from the United States. It's not like looking at a map. It's just one Earth. There's no boundaries. There's nothing dividing the countries. If more people had that experience, then I think it would go a long way towards perhaps beginning to solve a lot of the problems we have here on Earth. And it's absolutely amazing. And you'll hear every astronaut, cosmonaut, taikonaut, everybody feels the same way. You just look back and think, man, this is one little jewel of a planet. Travel here on Earth, too. broadens your perspectives and your understanding of other people and cultures. Even if you're one of the lucky people to live to be 105 like my grandmother, in the vastness of time and space, that isn't a lot. So, you just need to go and explore. Because every time you go to another country or you have a different experience, it really pushes you to be better. It just changes everything. You appreciate each experience more. And I think that's what we all love about it. Travel makes you a better person, a better citizen of this planet of ours.